Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wassalam ala Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Welcome to the Deen and Duty podcast. I'm your host, Kareem Elsayed. Welcome to our inaugural episode of this new podcast put on by the Bay Area Muslim Council. And the goal of this podcast is for us to share stories of civic service from those of us here in our Bay Area community that have been involved in civic service. And we want to learn from them, learn lessons, and see just how approachable and easy it is for us to get involved in our broader communities. And I'm so delighted today to welcome the founder of the Bay Area Muslim Council, Brother Razi Mohiuddin. Welcome. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much for having me.
It's my pleasure. So excited for you to be here on this first episode for this new project that we're putting on. And I want to start with the first question. What is your story of civic service?
Thank you. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. Jazakallah khair for that question, and great idea to put this podcast together. Thank you for having me as the first guest on this one. My story of civic engagement is very similar to many of the first generation immigrants that have come to the United States here, have come in for working, as an example, in order to earn a living and have families and so on. But then, as you grow and as you do all of those things, one of the things that you realize is that you need to now give back to the community in some form or the other, give back to the larger society, not just to the Muslim community, which is what the vast majority of folks that have done. And that's great, but I think we need to go beyond. And it started after the horrific events of 9/11, where I think we all came to realize that, we had been very insular, that we have been just focused on ourselves effectively, which was kind of the right thing to do probably prior to that thing. But I think it was very important for us to realize that we can no longer be in that state moving forward on that one. I started becoming much more active in the civic affairs of our community. Initially, first of all, kind of doing it from the Masjid side. So in that sense, I was elected the president of MCA, the Muslim Community Association of the Bay Area, which is one of the largest masajids and mosques in the United States, and served there from 2003 to 2007 for about 4 years. This was literally a year after 9/11, and it was one of the most tumultuous times and one of the most times when the magnifying glass was on our community over there. From there, then I went on and served on the national board of Council on American Islamic Relations chair for several years, as well as in the local chapter in the San Francisco Bay Area as well. And then continued on a number of different fronts. One of the most recent things that I've done is served on the planning commission of the city of Saratoga, which is where I live, for the last 8 years. I just a year ago was the end of my second term. So that's just a brief story of why and what I've done.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. There's so much that I want to ask you about this. So let me get this straight. 9/11 happens, and you decide to get more involved in the Muslim community and to lead one of the largest masajid in the nation. What was going through your head saying that you want to help lead during this very tumultuous period, as you described?
Yeah, I have been an entrepreneur. I've started a number of different companies and have done, alhamdulillah, very well for myself and for my family here. And I think it was a realization after the horrific events there that we do need to now create essentially a sense of community, which then participates in the wider society. In the first place, right? It's not just about being insular, just being inwardly focused, not just about our deen being kind of just sell only to ourselves, that we need to actually now look at the values of our deen and actually go about and communicating that and making sure that what we are doing is building a just world around us, as an example. So by giving back, I think what we are trying to do is make sure that the world reflects some of the basic principles of our deen, justice, compassion, human dignity. And I think that's kind of what led me to continued involvement on the civic affairs here.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so you were with the MCA for a number of years, and then you decided to get even more involved by joining CARE and getting involved in the board there. Again, was it were you not satisfied with what you're able to accomplish on that scale? You were thinking bigger? Tell us about, the progression of your
Yeah.
involvement.
Uh, The Masjid was a great learning experience and actually contributing from that perspective because we were able to hold at that time, for example, a number of open houses. We initiated the concept of open houses at that point in time
Oh, wow.
that did not exist prior to that, in that sense, Ramadan open houses and many others. We took out big ads in newspapers and in those days. Invited a lot of people and many, and what we saw was that the vast majority of the people around us are actually hungry for information about Islam and about Muslims. We were kind of portrayed in the media as an alien and not being part of the society over here. So MCA was a great place to kind of learn and also contribute back to the community over here. And what I saw missing there was that we were not essentially, and there were a number of different challenges that the community was facing at that point in time. There was harassment. There was civil rights issues that we were dealing with. Some parts of our community. It was smaller. It was not huge, but nevertheless there was, and especially to the vulnerable population, as an example. Especially, for example, to our sisters who were wearing hijab, who were facing tremendous amount of discrimination, tremendous amount of harassment, and every time they would go out into the shopping center or to work or something like that, being stared at and being looked upon. So I joined the Council on American Islamic Relations CARE on the national board, tried to determine what is the best way. At that time, CARE was also very early.
Mm.
One of the things we tried to do as part of the national board was actually created the chapter strategy in order to leverage that. Now there are about 30 plus chapters that are there for CARE. But those were early days, as an example, and you can see kind of how CARE has grown into the major institution for the benefit of our community here.
Alhamdulillah. No, may Allah reward you for that innovation and concept. I think, as we can see, it's the shield that defends our community. So
Absolutely.
that's amazing. So it's interesting. You're saying at first you wanted to give back, almost from a sense of, I've taken care of myself and my family. Let us contribute to the community. But then, as you're in the process of doing that, you're starting to see these harassment issues and things of that nature. And so now you're wanting to do something more about it. And what I see in both of those situations is someone who has an internal sense of agency. Like, you think there's something you can do about it, and you just, nobody gave you instructions and said, "Hey, please, brother, can you, step up and get involved." You just decided to do that. You thought, "Hey, I can do something here," and you started to do that. Can you say a little bit more about that? What makes you so confident that you can actually make an impact like that?
I think one of the things, especially as an entrepreneur, that you learn very quickly is that nobody kind of tells you that you should do something or you are the leader to lead a thing and so on. So I think I've always had that innate thing that said if I want to do something, I need to take upon myself in order to figure out how to actually accomplish some there. So to me, it's a natural part of kind of my thing that I need to, I want to do something that can give back. And so once I've set my mind on essentially saying giving back, then I started figuring out what is the best way for me to give back, as an example. The first thing was because we were already organized as a mosque and as a community, it was easy to kind of just say, okay, now let me see if I can go and lead something there and kind of set the direction of the community in a certain way. And we were able to do a variety of different things. For example, we increased the number of volunteers that were there, the number of activities that are there. I used to say, come to play and stay to pray. So we grew kind of the community in a significant way and really put structure and made it into a much more, much better institution from that perspective. It was already an institution, but the goal was to kind of make it much more structurally improve that in there. But then the next question was, okay, is that sufficient? Is that enough? How do we go beyond that? How do we make sure that we are able to kind of then build relationships with other folks that will allow us to open some doors and so on? One story that sticks in my mind about that was right after 9/11, as a community, we started reaching out to, for example, the FBI. And
Wait, you proactively reached out to the FBI?
we had and started developing, at least a talking relationship over there. FBI was obviously out to, essentially investigate and figure out if there's any kind of threat to the nation and so on. And one of the things we realized is that, one thing that sticks in my mind is that when at one point we were finding out that a number of community members were being investigated, and the FBI was coming to their workplace to do that, which was creating a challenge for the individuals because they were essentially being in the workplace became guilty before being innocent, as an example. So the thing that we did was when we had a conversation with the FBI to, at least understand what to do, we went out and told the special agent in charge, saying, I know you have to do the investigation and so on, but can you do it in a way that at least allows us to make sure that people are not being kind of potentially create a challenge with their workplace or things of that nature. And I think it made a little bit of a difference because that's kind of what was the confirmation that we got from the special agent in charge at that particular point in time. But what that proved to me is that we can start a conversation even if there are adversarial relationships that exist effectively. And those conversations could help us essentially build bridges that could effectively help our community, even in small ways. And I think that created essentially in my mind that we always need to have that conversation, regardless of who it is, in order to build those relationships over there, even if it is an adversary or even if somebody is on the other side, if you will, in terms of how we are thinking about it. Because by having that conversation, we may be able to kind of blunt the sharp instruments in some form or the other in order for us to essentially get a little bit better in terms of, policies may not be able to be changed, like, for example, in that case, but we may be able to change some of the implementation of those policies in a way that would essentially help our community. So that was a very interesting and insightful learning that has kind of shaped my thinking over the years as far as how to kind of interact with the wider society and how do we actually build those relationships.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I'm learning things about you, even after having known you for so long, that really shape how your strategy and your approach. And you're describing someone who is doing the best they can where they are with what they have. And it reminds me of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. It says, "Ballighu anni walau ayah." Speak about me even if it's one ayah. You don't know what's the best way to get involved. You have an urge to help. We're involved in the masjid. Let's do the masjid. Oh, we've learned that as we're involved in the masjid, we really need to protect our people. Let's get involved in care. And I'm curious how that then translates into the planning commission, city of Saratoga. Tell me about that transition. How did you discover that there even is something called the planning commission and decide to get involved in, local issues like that? How did you get involved?
Yeah. It's so, some of these things are not by any kind of grand plans. We fall into these kind of things. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a way of kind of making some of these things happen. And this was, so two things basically were happening around that time. After I served at MCA and after I served in care, then we realized that there is a need for a masjid in the Saratoga, Cupertino, other areas, as an example. In 2007, we were able to kind of actually I founded the West Valley Muslim Association, the Saratoga Masjid, if you want to call it. Now it has expanded to the Los Gatos facility over there. And one of the challenges that we faced early on in there was our community started growing. Initially, we rented a small 1,000 square foot facility, prayed the 5 daily prayers, and prayed some of the Ramadan Tarawih. But then the number of people started growing, and we needed to get another place. There was a Grace Methodist Church on Prospect Road that was on sale. We tried to bid that on that one, but we lost the bid, and the city of Saratoga acquired it. So we then decided, and City of Saratoga converted that place into a rental facility. So then we actually, and City of Saratoga said they will actually have a rental hours, which were like from morning till 9 p.m. or something like that. So we actually put a group together and we went in front of the Saratoga City Council and petitioned the City Council in order to provide us the ability to use that facility till midnight so that we can offer Ramadan prayers. So even today, we use the Saratoga Prospect Center for our Jummah as well as for our Taraweeh. And we are the only organization that is allowed to use that facility until midnight here. And we dealt with a number of different challenges from neighbors and others in order to get that. So that was one event, and the other one was that I also started becoming very interested in real estate and real estate investing as well. And I had after a little bit of time, I had started a real estate investment fund on that and invested in bought a number of properties and so on, both at a personal level as well as an investment fund. So it became obvious to me that I need to know a lot more about zoning, about what can be built, where can it be built, and things of that nature on that. So those were the two kind of things. And in between, we also started looking for new properties for Vesali WVMA to find a location. And what I found was that zoning ordinances played a huge role in where we could be located. Especially if you look at Saratoga, Cupertino area, it's mostly residential, unlike the MCA area and 101 corridor, which is much more industrial, light industrial, and so on. That is a residential corridor, and zoning and locating it nearby homes is a huge challenge. And I've been on a quest to kind of find a property for Saratoga in the Cupertino, Saratoga, West San Jose areas, and it has been a very big challenge because one, there are not that many properties available, but there are many restrictions, like Cupertino restricts where it can be located. Saratoga has very few large areas that are available, so it got me much more interested in learning about zoning ordinances and things like that. And as I started studying, I said, well, who makes these decisions? Well, it turns out that the Planning Commission is intimately involved in making these decisions and approving these things, and of course, City Council also. So then I investigated and I said, okay, let me see if I can, one of the best ways to learn is kind of then jump straight in. And
Typical entrepreneur.
yeah, you have to kind of just, there is no books are going to give you this kind of thing, basically. So I jumped in and basically applied. Was interviewed and was appointed as a planning commissioner, and I served 2 terms of 4 years each.
Okay, I love that. So, can you explain for our audience what is the difference between a commission, a board, but a city council? Many people may not be even aware of these different terms and what they mean. Can you elaborate?
The way that, and this is fascinating to me, right? Which is that the way that our country governs itself is by essentially dividing us into essentially units of essentially governance. And the unit of governance in our society here is a city. And city typically has an elected body called the city council or the town council over here. And then, of course, you have counties as well. And then there are other institutions like school boards and things of that nature. Many of these at the top level are councils that are elected. And that's great. That's the democracy in practice over here. But the council needs help to kind of delegate on a variety of different fronts. For example, there are zoning ordinances that have to be created essentially for a city of where houses can be located, where businesses can be located, what are the restrictions, what are the privacy issues, what are the traffic issues, what are many other issues. So what cities have done is they have actually created boards and commissions in order to help them. And these boards and commissions are actually appointed positions. And every city and every town in here has 6 to 10 or 20, and sometimes even more at the county level. There may be like 50 different boards and commissions, as an example, that exist, which are all appointed positions. And these appointed positions then basically are appointed by the council, and they help 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 the council in order to drive its delivery of its essentially services to the community.
Thank you for explaining that. That's really helpful. And judging by your expertise, what do you think, or how do you think Muslim communities can better advocate for their needs in their local communities, given this kind of structure and how the nation works, basically?
Uh, let's step back for a second on kind of what I think one of the things we have done is a great job of serving our own community, volunteering within masajids and things of that nature. But as you see around us, there are a number of challenges that I think communities face. Obviously, especially in the Bay Area, housing affordability is a great, huge issue. And I can see that many people, their children are not able to afford over here, and they have to move out and go into different towns, into Dallas or other places, because they cannot actually buy a place or even rent, afford the rent. So affordability is an issue that I think should be dear to us, something that we should care. Similar, I think we have a number of other challenges among the communities, as an example, like traffic, like public safety, like education, and so on. These are issues that are dear to us. That are very critical for us and they're very important to us. That we should have a say, and should have a say based on our faith as far as how do we impart justice, compassion, human dignity in each one of these issues, because we want to be able to deal with this. And certainly, another major issue that we face in our communities is homelessness. Every time I pass by some of the freeways over here, even among some of the several trillion-dollar companies being literally half a block away or a mile away, you see all of these tents, and my heart breaks at that because it's just unbelievable that we live in one of the richest societies in the world, and we see this level of homelessness and just unbearable from that perspective. So, what can we do and what should we do to give back in order to essentially make this society better for everyone, not just for us? I think that's a critical aspect that we need to focus on.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. And sometimes Muslims, like you said, we can be very insular. We focus on our own issues, but you're sort of redefining what are our issues. Our issues are the issues that affect the community at large. And I think, I don't know if you're doing this intentionally, but this leads us to your next adventure, so to speak, which is founding the Bay Area Muslim Council. So can you tell us a little bit about how this idea came about and, kind of coming out of your planning commission days and
Yeah.
starting this new organization that I don't believe there's any other organization like it in the country. Tell us a little bit about it, how it started, and maybe the mission that you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think one of the things I realize is that, again, I am a student of kind of trying to figure out as an entrepreneur, you're always trying to figure out where the gaps are effectively in there and how to do that. I think we as a community have done great in terms of establishing the massages. I think we have done great in terms of creating these civil rights organizations, as an example. One of the things we have lacked is kind of the ability for us to kind of get engaged with elected officials, as an example, and have discussion about policies and make that change. The approach that we have taken in the political front, if you will, has been one of either supporting our potential candidates with money, and in some cases with essentially meeting them primarily for photo ops, as an example. But we haven't really been able to kind of engage with them on a policy level. So the idea behind Bay Area Muslim Council was that how do we now start working with our elected officials on policies, as an example? But in order to do that, we need to make sure that our community is aware and engaged at the local level in order to actually make sure that they are aware of some of the issues and study them and be able to engage with them so that we can actually move the needle from one to another one in the ethical and the things that our faith teaches us, that Islam teaches us. So the idea, and so I started studying kind of, how can people serve? How can we increase the engagement of our community, as an example? What I found out just in the Bay Area, for example, there are 9 counties, 101 cities. Each one of these cities and counties have elected officials, but they also have, like I mentioned before, 6 to 10 or 12 different commissions, as an example. And when I started looking at that, I found, and then my own experience with planning commission, I found that there were almost 25,000 people within the Bay Area that serve in some capacity or the other to give back to the community at large, as an example. Many of them, 98% of them, are probably volunteers. Only about 2% of them are, elected officials. 98% of them are appointed. They're not paid, or even if they're paid, it's mainly just, something just as minimal compensation, effectively, in that sense. But each one of these 25,000 people that are serving have some level of influence in terms of policies, like, what happens, what is the curriculum in a school board, as an example. What are the zoning? How do we build higher density, and so on. This led me to basically saying what we really need to do is create an organization that is hyper local, that serves at a very, very granular level at each city level, in order to develop the community within that city and educate them about the local issues and have them grow in and start serving the local community. So that was kind of the goal behind the Bay Area Muslim Council, in order to create a hyper local organization that would start growing and creating awareness in the community of these issues, developing policies, and then engaging with potentially elected officials on how to kind of make changes in those policies.
And I think this is an incredible and very unique theory of change in the Muslim community. And it's a different paradigm. It's a different way of thinking because, like you mentioned, we either raise funds, try to meet with officials, but it's not really, it's quite superficial. Or the other one is that we really focus on is voting.
Mhm.
Can you talk to that a little bit? Many people might say, you know what, brother, I'm just going to do my job. I'll vote in November, usually only on the presidential election, and let me just take care of my family. And why are you making this so complicated? Why do we have to learn all these things? And we came to this country for our economic opportunities, or can we just be in our own communities and take care of our own? Can you speak to that idea of doing the I don't want to say the minimum, but doing these basics, and that should be enough, right?
Yeah. Uh, Voting is very important because it essentially helps effectively get, make sure that we are able to get people elected to our offices that are thinking about kind of from the right policies and so on. But is that really sufficient? Because what happens is, when most of the elected officials go up there, then we have just essentially passed the ball to them in order to do that. And that ball, from when they take that ball and try to implement some of those policies, more often than not, what we find is that they are actually going off in a direction that is completely against kind of the basic sense and values that we hold dear to our faith and to ourselves, as an example. So voting by itself is a very, very, very important thing, but that cannot be just one small thing that we do. It's no different than, I think, one of the things that we have trained our community to do is, for example, we talk about, hey, action alert, pick up a phone and call this elected official, and all you need is 2 minutes of your time in order to do that. But unfortunately, the mindset that has been created with those kind of action alerts is that this issue only requires 2 minutes of your investment in there. No, it cannot be just 2 minutes of your investment. If you want to change that policy fundamentally from the ground up, you got to learn those policies. You cannot just rely on somebody else to make that phone call. Most of the time, you receive a recorded, please record your message, and that's the end of that thing, basically, right? And why are we on this side of the phone rather than on the other side of the phone, as an example? Why can't we be the recipients of those phone calls so that we can hear from the wider community and be able to impact to change that? So the goal cannot be just voting. voting is an important part, but we need to be actually on the other end of the receiver of the votes so that we can actually change the policies of our society, as an example. But that sense have to be developed from the ground up. It cannot be, you cannot run for Congress. What I say is sometimes people think that they can jump from ground zero to the 10th story. You cannot. You have to climb one step at a time. So the one step at a time, in my sense, is to start serving at a very, very hyper local level at the boards and commissions over there. If we can get 1,000 people to serve in those things, for example, some of those thousands will start serving and maybe get elected to city councils, as an example, and the counties and the state and the federal level and the congressional level and so on. So this is a long-term project. I'm not expecting instant results in this thing. I'm expecting that it may take us 10 years or maybe 20 years in order to have that. But we will have that, inshallah, through the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if we are able to essentially make sure that our community changes their thinking to give back to the wider society.
Yeah. And I think, again, it's a different paradigm. It's a different way of thinking about civic engagement in the long term, because normally what we see in our communities, we're very reactive.
Mhm.
But what you're saying is, no, let's take a very long-term lens, not even a very long-term lens. We're talking 10 years or more for us to really have the type of impact, 20 years that we want to have. And why is it important for us as Muslims living in this country, part of the fabric of this society, to have a long-term lens when we think about civic engagement?
Um, one of the things I always thought about is that I come originally from India, and I have seen this movie being played out in India, where the Muslims, for the most part, have not been involved civically in there. There are very few Muslims that serve in the different kinds of governments, as an example, or get elected, as an example, in there. And that has been to the detriment of the Muslim community over there. Even though we are the third largest Muslim population in the world, right after maybe or even the second largest population, with right after Indonesia, here, the influence that we have with 200 million Muslims in India is minimal. And part of the reason was that we have never been involved in the civic affairs, that we have again been very insular. So it's critical for us not to just think about ourselves. And when you think about this and you look at our children that are growing up, as an example, what is what can they do in order to ensure that there is justice in the world, as an example, which is part of the faith that we are trying to live by and implement, as an example. And in order to do that, it is critical for us to get involved. It is critical for us to make sure that we are actually building a just society in this country. And if we don't, then we are always going to be reactive. We are always going to be transactional. We're always going to be on the receiving end of things, as an example. So we have to change the paradigm to be proactive, long term, that we would do, and not just think about our community, but think about the wider community. That all of the Americans in this country are folks that we can help impart some level of justice, some level of human dignity and compassion. And that's how we should think about our role in our society here.
Yeah. And I know, just in working with you for BAMC, this is actually one of the key, I'd say, hot buttons for you personally, is not even using language that sort of implies our goal is power or influence or some of these things. You really stress the word service and serving the broader community. Can you speak to that? Well, I mean, shouldn't we want power, or shouldn't we want influence? I mean, we're trying to make a difference here. Why do you really emphasize that point?
I think when you think about our faith, at the end of the day, what is it about at the end of the day? It's about basically making sure that there is a positive influence to the society in here. We're not seeking power for the sake of doing something what is the reason for seeking power? Why would we seek the power if there was nothing that we would impart justice to the world as an example, right? What is the purpose of influence if we cannot actually influence a society to change for the better, if you will? So power and influence are maybe byproducts that we might get out of there, but that's not what we are seeking. That should not be what we seek in there. What we need to do is be genuine that we are actually here to help improve the society. And how we do that is through service, so that we give back. And through that giving back, we may realize the benefits of power and influence and so on. But if we do get those benefits, we need to also be conscious that we use it in the right way, not in the wrong way, effectively, not to enrich ourselves or not to, do something which is not appropriate based on, uh, our faith and our values.
Okay, I want to go back to something we were saying earlier, that while yes, we want to serve, um, there's something about Muslims. I don't know what it is. I want to get your opinion, your theory on this. Why is it that so many Muslims are, I don't want to say apathetic, but insular? They're not engaged. They maybe, you mentioned in, so-called the Muslim world, and even as when they come to this country, they many of them show the same types of patterns of behavior. Why are we like this? Why don't we want to get involved? And what's your theory? Why do you think people are like that?
I think there can be many reasons, right? We have been, when we arrived first here, then our focus was, kind of essentially settling down and making some, raising our families and moving up in the corporate ladder, as an example, or starting businesses and things of that nature. So our focus has been towards a different mode. Second, I think what has happened is that there hasn't been a cookbook that defined how do you actually develop a community in that sense. Many of the khutbahs that I see in the masajids talk about how to do personal benefit as an example, and that's a great thing that we should continue to communicate as an example, right? But I'd love to see a change in our thinking of our society to say, okay, how do we actually go back and serve? And what are the ways that you can serve? There are many ways that we can serve. And I think many people don't know what it means to serve. What is the time commitment, as an example? And how do I even find my way through and saying, is there somebody who can help me, who can guide me, who can be my buddy or coach or something to that effect? And this is where Bay Area Muslim Council comes in. That what we are doing is having training and workshops, as an example, will help you, guide you to fill out your application for that and prepare you for the 15-minute interview that you might have. Or how do you serve and how do you behave when you actually are in front of that podium and you are actually serving that community, as an example. And we want to help people with policies and things of that nature. So, as an organization, we can kind of give you the guidance and the cookbook and the steps effectively in order to serve. So, I think it's not just, I don't know if it's apathy per se. There certainly apathy plays a role. I think part of it is that there is no path that has been clearly defined. There is no cookbook and so on. So, one of the first things that we're trying to do is change that to define kind of what is the pathway to get there.
Yeah, so it's almost like blazing a trail and creating a template for
Yeah.
people to follow. And I think one thing that I see when people do that is they may come also up against some obstacles and some challenges as they get involved. So, can you speak to what are some of the obstacles that people may face as they want to get more engaged and they want to be more involved, especially for the young people who maybe are passionate or feel like they can or want to make a difference? What are some of the obstacles and how might they overcome them?
I think one of the key things that we're also trying to do is that, of course, the obstacles could be multiple, right? Of course, there could be personal obstacles in terms of time, availability, and meetings and things of that nature. There could also be obstacles in terms of how do I deal with these contentious issues, as an example. And there could be obstacles with respect to other things, like, for example, what is happening in the world and so on. I think one of the things that we can do is by banding together and creating essentially a network of people that are serving, I think we can even exchange ideas. Let me tell you what's happening in Saratoga. What are you seeing in your town as an example? Let's talk about that. How has your town addressed this? How has our town addressed this as an example, right? So one of the goals is also for us to actually develop that network so that we can share these ideas and overcome these obstacles. Today, for example, recently, as I started growing the organization, realized that many people are doing great work in our communities. They're engaging at the right level. They are serving, but they're all doing it as individuals, and they're not benefiting from knowledge for each other, as an example, right? So one of the goals is to let's see if we can kind of sit down together and share these ideas so that we can learn from each other and we can benefit each other in the process effectively, right? I think any of those obstacles can be easily overcome because we can essentially share that information and grow together as part of that thing. So rather than every one of us kind of opening up a new road, if you will, and learning on our own and kind of not being able to kind of share that, this is a way for us to kind of bring it all under one umbrella so that we could share and learn and grow together as a community.
And so now here we are in 2026 as we're recording this, and we have the Bay Area Muslim Council who is trying to make it easy for anyone in the Bay Area to get more involved, to get more civically engaged. What is your long-term vision? What's your long-term goal or dream with this? You kind of hinted at it earlier, but can you spell it out for us? Because I think sometimes when we have that vision, that North Star that we are looking toward, it becomes very easy to march forward. We have a sense of direction and navigation. So,
Yeah.
what is your dream outcome for us here with the Bay Area Muslim Council?
Yeah, if there was one thing that I would suggest as our North Star goal is that I mentioned earlier about 25,000 individuals serving in some capacity or the other the communities around the Bay Area. I'd love to see thousand of them being Muslim that are connected together, that are talking to each other, that essentially are promoting values and justice and human dignity together, basically with them. So that's our North Star goal, at least with Bay Area Muslim Council. Now, what comes out of that is that I hope that not just those thousand people, but I hope that in their dinner circles, in their other things, that they started changing the conversation about not just about things that are unattainable, basically, or things like that, but talking about attainable things that we as a community can impact in there. So the things that we talked about, affordability as an example, homelessness, public safety, traffic, school curriculums, and all of these things. So I think what we want to do is fundamentally change the dinner time conversations around our parties and around events in order to say, okay, how can we improve our society here? That's really the ultimate goal. But the North Star goal of getting 1,000 people to serve, I think, is one that I think will have a tremendous amount of repercussions across, which will actually make sure that the conversations fundamentally change, that will grow our community in this sense in a very different way than what we've been able to do in the past.
And that's actually why we started this podcast. If
Yes.
you remember, I remember you we were sitting once and you mentioned that wanting to change the conversation, and that well, how else can we do that? How else can we get this message out? We need to create a space for people who are involved in this work to have these conversations, to talk about what is working and what is not, and to teach people and to have a medium for us to share that. And so that's why we're here today. So thank you again for doing that. And for those who are listening, look at the camera for this. For those of us for those who are listening and watching, please like and subscribe to this, and also share this episode with someone who you think may be interested in getting more involved in civic affairs and in civic life, to see that it is possible and there is a path forward for us as a community to get more engaged. Now, with that, one of the other things that we talk about in the Bay Area Muslim Council is kind of creating an ecosystem. You mentioned kind of the ripple effects of doing this work. Talk to me a little bit about the different organizations, like alliances, like-minded organizations, whether they are Muslim organizations or non-Muslim organizations, the Masjid. There's so many players in the space, and what we're talking about is a really fundamental change in how we show up in civic life. What does that ecosystem look like in the future, going forward?
I think one of the things that I always talk about, in whether it is in entrepreneurship or whether it is in any of these things, is that we need to have an abundant mindset, not a scarcity mindset. What does an abundant mindset means? That, what we need to do as a community is think about kind of making sure that our community is uplifted in all ways possible effectively, whether it is on the civic affairs, whether it's on the financial affairs, whether in terms of technology, whether in terms of other things. So to me, in order to do that, we cannot be exclusionary. We need to be inclusive. We need to have those level of communication with anybody and everybody. But part of the thing is that how do we make sure that we have alliances, as an example, that will help us make sure we will learn from them. We will request their support when we need something, and they can request our support when they need it. As an example, there are many organizations that are very much trying to help out. They may be focused on certain issues. Affordability might be one issue that some organizations focus on. Another one may be homelessness and things like that. If we agree on the policies that we want to impart, and part of the mission of the Area Muslim Council is also to develop those policies that we as a community can then kind of go out and advance. And if those policies then match with certain alliances and organizations, we should definitely leverage them, as an example. Then when we engage with elected officials, we are able to essentially engage with them on a regular basis with regular cadence. It's not just only at election time, as an example. We can engage with them on a quarterly basis or whatever cadence that we agree to. And when we engage with them, we don't necessarily discuss the hot button issue of today, but we want to develop a relationship with them that is based on some of these policies that fundamentally we can help change, as an example. Then, when the hot button issue comes up, it's then not a new conversation. It's a continuation of an existing conversation that we have had on an ongoing basis. A lot of times, when we meet with elected officials, uh, their positions also evolve, as an example. And the part of the evolution of that is coming through education, to their education. So, what we need to do is build those relationships and educate them. I have already seen this happen as we have met with certain elected officials. For example, recently we met with one congressman, as an example, and we went and discussed 6 different issues with them, including what happened to the Stanford 11, as an example, who are being, felony charges are being filed to them against them for protesting, as an example. But we also wanted to talk to them about issues like the conditional use permit of West Valley Muslim Association, as an example, or about what is happening in Gaza, as an example, and so on. So we want to work with them on a variety of different issues, as an example, in there. And we want to do that with regular cadence, as an example. So it's not a photo op, it's not a fundraising, it's actually to meet and have a real discussion with them on policy so that we can actually move the needle on each one of them. And then we want to hold them accountable so that they essentially, and they said, you promised us to do such things. Have you delivered that or not, as an example, on that? And so that's what we need to do.
So that is powerful. And are there any other wins or case studies that you can share, stories that you can tell us about how this process actually works and how it is possible, and to see it play out in action?
Yeah, so I think multiple things, right? One is that we have started engaging with elected officials, as well as having candidate forums, as an example. And these candidate forums are designed to essentially, what we do is we do a tremendous amount of preparation in order to actually create a set of questions that are meaningful to our community, as an example. And when we engage with them, we want to ask them about these questions and look at their response, as an example. We want to continue to engage with them to see if we can actually change some of those policies, as an example. So, for example, we have met with 2 or 3. We have met with one governor candidate, and we're meeting with another soon, as an example. So those are some of the wins I think that we are having at this point in time. But again, this is part of it is actually also training our community to actually engage at a level of policies that has not been the case before. It's been much more kind of a rifle shot, as an example, where, on a particular issue and nothing else, as an example, and there is no follow through, as an example. So here we're trying to create essentially a regular cadence of meetings. We bring about different things, and we've already had some success, and now we are templatizing that and actually laying that out to all of our 10 different hyperlocal chapters in the Bay Area, all the way from San Francisco to South County, Gilroy, and all the way to Modesto and Stockton area there. So that's kind of the thing that we're doing. Another thing that we have done is we want to study our community. So we have been able to kind of get the voter registration database of all 22 million voters of in California. We have analyzed it in terms of ethnic makeup, the national origin, religion, and things of that nature. And we have a much better understanding of how many Muslims there are in various cities and towns, as an example, or in various districts. We can leverage this data in order to go back and to the elected officials and say, listen, we can bring something here of value to you based on what these issues are, and also being able to raise the awareness within our community that if there is a particular issue that is dear to us, as an example, we know how many people there are, how can we reach out, and how can we influence this particular policy, like, for example, in a school district, as an example, which is a very hot button issue in terms of curriculum these days.
Yeah. And as I hear you talking about this, it's almost like representation for the Muslim community is beyond voting. It's beyond even having our own Muslim representatives, being in positions, as we've started to see here in the Bay Area, a lot more folks getting, elected and running for those positions. But what you're saying is essentially this is an ongoing process. So can you speak a little bit more to that idea of what does it mean to actually represent the issues that we care about and make sure that we are driving an initiative or an agenda for change in the Bay Area?
Few things, basically, right? One is that every person, I find, is passionate about one or two issues, as an example. If I'm passionate about issue one, maybe you're not passionate about it, or something to that effect, right? One of the key things that we need to do is really, number one, we need to make sure that we have continuous engagement. It's not just at one time and then give up and then wake up at some other event that happens in major. I think, of course, October 7th created essentially a great awareness in our community that we need to engage in a much different fashion, as an example. So what we're trying to do is create a continuous engagement model, effectively, on a regular basis. That's not just with elected officials, but ourselves as well. Second, we want to make sure that we are able to essentially identify people who are passionate about certain issues and essentially group them together across the different Bay Area communities so that we essentially can formulate a standard set of talking points and a standard set of policies that we can then engage across multiple districts, across multiple cities, across multiple areas, as an example. Third, what we want to do is make sure that we are able to then also coach the people and train them so that they know exactly how to actually, that we have developed these policies, that we can then essentially make sure that how do we talk about these policies and engage them in the right way with all of the elected officials as well.
Awesome. And so for someone who's heard the pitch, basically, they're sold.
Yes.
They agree, they want to get involved. As we wrap up here as well, what can they do to get started? What is the first step? Someone who maybe they've never done anything beyond maybe voting in the general election for president.
Yeah.
Where do they start? How do they get started? How do they get started? Maybe with BAMC or period. How do they get started?
There are many ways of getting started, and you can chart your own course if you want to. So be it. But as long as everybody is getting involved, that's the goal. If you want us to help, we stand ready to help. As an example, as Bay Area Muslim Council, you can go to bamcouncil.org, join the organization as an example, and there are many workshops and training workshops that we're holding. You can come in. Some of them are virtual, some of them are in person. Please join. That's the first step. If you're passionate about a particular issue, reach out to us. We can put you together with other people who are passionate about the same issue so that you can kind of get some of the policies together. If you're passionate about engaging with elected officials, again, get back in touch with us and then work with us to kind of, engage with those elected officials on those policies as an example. They could be candidates or elected officials. We're having a number of different events across, especially now that is coming up to the election season. We also have a C4 organization that is a C3 and a C3, C4. We have a nonprofit, which is educational organization, but also a C4 organization that can actually endorse candidates as well, to the extent that if we choose to do so, as an example. So we have an ability to connect at any level effectively in engaging with the elected officials.
So in closing, what is your final advice for someone who is listening to this and maybe kind of contemplating, should I get involved? What do I do? How do I get started? What's your final?
Our North Star goal is to get 1,000 people serving, 1,000 Muslims serving in some civic capacity or the other in the 9 counties and 101 cities of the Bay Area. So the first order of business is, please help join a training and workshop in order to become one of those 1,000 people that is serving in some capacity or the other at boards and commissions levels, and use that as a stepping stone potentially to grow into the next level of serving into the civic societies.
I love that. Okay. With that, I'm going to ask you one final question and then we'll wrap up for today. What does it mean to live out your deen and duty? What does that mean to you?
To me, it fundamentally means that it's not just about me kind of making sure that I am practicing my faith internally, but it's also behaving as a Muslim in making sure that I'm honest and dealing fairly in my businesses, in my all of my ethics. But more importantly, it's actually trying to fundamentally change the society for a net positive. And I think that is the critical part that I think we need to fundamentally change. We as Muslims in America have a unique advantage. We are well to do, we are well educated, we know the issues very well. We can actually make a difference worldwide, not just in our local communities, but we can make a difference worldwide in creating a just world. And that, I think, should be our mission. That is what I think our deen teaches us. That was what Prophet Muhammad did when he actually expanded kind of this across the world. That's what our mission is. That's what we need to do.
I love it. Thank you so much, Brother Razi. Jazakallah khair. Allah bless you. Thank you for joining us for this podcast. And we'll see you all, inshallah, in the next one. Assalamu alaikum.